right, good morning, everyone. How are we doing? All right, brains full already? Good, it's about to get much worse. Fair warning, this talk expires quickly. I was making changes last night, that's how fast it was. So if you're watching a recording of this in the future at some point, if it's after November 21st, maybe don't. There's also a lot in here, so if you would like the slides, you can get them at wherecanIgettheslides.com. If you feel overwhelmed, you're not alone and it's perfectly normal. We spent 500,000 years like digging, right? We had the Renaissance in the 1500s, the Industrial Revolution in 1880, and then ever since then it's been a constant, never-ending cycle of change. We just got through the mobile revolution, and now we're dealing with artificial intelligence, the intelligence revolution. And we've seen plenty of examples today. ChatGPT, probably the most well-known brand of it. You have Google Bard, Google Search Generative Experiments, which we're going to talk about. If you are a marketer and you are dealing with search, this is going to change your world, and not in a good way. Microsoft Bing, Claude, and open source models like LM Studio. When we talk about models, you've heard this term a lot today, and you'll hear it more. A model is just a piece of software, right? Microsoft Word is a piece of software written by a human for humans to use. A model is AI software written by AI for AI to use. This is important because we are used to talking about interfaces, right? ChatGPT is an interface, Microsoft Bing is an interface. But we're now starting to see your ability to use and change the model that you use underneath because they all have different capabilities. You can tell marketers did not name those models. But it's important to know them. So what the heck are these things? It all starts with a quote from John Rupert Firth in 1957, a linguist who said, "You shall know a word by the company it keeps." You shall know a word by the company it keeps. If I say, "I'm brewing the tea," and you speak North American English, you know that I'm generally talking about a cup of hot water and some dried leaves. But words depend on each other. If I say, "I'm spilling the tea," I changed one word and it changes the other word, right? We now are talking about gossip. All language models are just built on statistical distributions. What words happen to be near other words? How these things work. In 2017, Google created this architecture called the transformer architecture. If you enjoy linear algebra and calculus, there's a great paper you can read about this. If you don't enjoy those subjects, that's fine. But all it is taking enormous amounts of text and building relationships of what words happen to be near other words. If you took a piece of text, like a paper, a blog post, an email, and you pretended it was a pizza, then these models would be cookbooks, right? If you were to go around the world and eat pizza in every single pizza shop that you could find, two things you would have at the end. One, you would have a cookbook of all the pizzas you could ever imagine. Two, you would have illness. Severe illness. But once you had that, there's no pizza in the world that you could come up with that you couldn't imagine because you've seen it all somehow. Right? If someone said, "Hey, let's put mushroom and pepper and pineapple on a pizza," 40% of the room will immediately say pineapple does not belong on pizza, and that's fine. But you would know this. You've seen it or something like it. That's what these models are. They have seen so much language that when we ask them to do something, they've seen it or something like it, and they have a statistical distribution of it and can spit back something that looks a lot like what we asked for. We program these models with a technique called prompt engineering. And this is a really important point. If you have used ChatGPT or any of the language model interfaces, you are a programmer. You may not have thought so, you may not have gone to school for it, you are a programmer. OpenAI co-founder Andrej Karpathy said at the beginning of this year, the hottest language, programming language in the world right now is plain English. Right? You are a programmer. So how does this work? If you think about word clouds, right? Every word has a word cloud around it of other words. You know, think about associations. What are the words that to your mind immediately come to your mind when you say the word association? That's a word cloud. Every time we type a prompt into these engines, we are creating a word cloud at a time. Now, this is a bit of an oversimplification. There's vectors, embeddings, and all this other math, but you have these word clouds. When the prompt engineering begins, when the model starts constructing, it looks for the word clouds intersections, where they overlap. And the more overlaps there are, the easier it is for the model to spit out something intelligible. This is why, if you've ever typed in a really short prompt, you get a really kind of bland answer, right? You get a boring, not particularly creative, not particularly good answer. Why? There's very few word clouds. There's very few words. So the model's like, okay, I'm just going to pick the stuff that occurs most in this very short prompt. Kind of bland, right? Kind of boring. If I add more words to my prompt, write a short paragraph about how AI is being used in marketing with a focus on transformer-based generative AI models such as those found in GPT-4 and Claude 2. More words, bigger word clouds, more intersections, better response. When people say AI is not creative, what they're really saying is they didn't put in a very creative prompt. Right? These tools are just tools. They're mirrors of our language. And again, the more you put in, the better you get. I have a long paragraph here, just a whole bunch of words. The intersections of the word clouds creates a much better outcome. It creates something that actually is kind of unique, that actually is kind of insightful, because now we're digging around and exporting all of these intersections in these word clouds. So if you remember nothing else from this entire talk, it is this: the more relevant words you use in a prompt in today's models, the better it's going to perform. If you use more relevant words, the better it's going to perform. I'll give you a template, there are many, a template for how to structure prompts to get some value today. We call it RACE: role, action, context, execute. Role. You tell the machine who it is. These are words, bring up word clouds, and around a specific subject. You are a Google Analytics certified professional. You know Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, Google Looker Studio, BigQuery, etc. Your first task is to examine this table of channel grouping data and analyze the overall composition of site traffic. You'll be analyzing for marketing channel diversity. Then you give it a whole bunch of data, background information, and the very large public models can all process these. And then you give it an execution statement. Analyze the composition of the site traffic and provide recommendations in bullet point format for a marketer's next step to increase traffic. That's a pretty beefy prompt. Right? That's a lot of information. That's a lot of word clouds. And the result is really good. You get a nice analysis. I'm using the GPT-4 model here. The analysis is really good. And then the recommendations are pretty solid, because again, we gave it lots of words to grab onto, and it was able to create solid recommendations. You can do this today at lunch if you want, with your data and with your information. If you would like, there is a one-page template you can download, no forms to fill out or anything like that. Go to trustinsights.ai/prompt sheet, and you can just hang this up just to help structure your prompts. And again, it doesn't have to be this. You can do who, what, where, when, why, and how. You can do beginning, middle, end. However you write, just write more details. Here's the funny thing about prompt engineering, by the way. The people who are going to be best at it in your organization are not going to be the developers and tech heads. That's probably going to be your writers, because they're used to writing and providing detail and stuff. I see some writers sharing happy NaNoWriMo. Let's talk about use cases. Here's the problem with use cases. Language models, all of these generative models, but language models in specific work with language. What function in your organization does not use language? None of them, right? We all use language for everything. So we kind of have to bucket our use cases into categories, use case categories. Generation, extraction, summarization, rewriting, classification, and question answering. Kind of 6 big behavioral buckets. And we're going to go through each of these and look at a few examples. Generation's the easy one, right? Write me a blog post. Everybody knows this one. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it. But it's any kind of writing where there's been a previous example of some kind. For example, I was asked by a client to help with a privacy policy on their website. I said, here's the technology list, write me a privacy policy. It did, it spit one out. I then handed it to a human lawyer, because for any high-risk writing, you want human overview all the time. Right? Legal documents should never just be handed out without human review. My lawyer looked at it, said it missed 1 or 2 things, but for the most part, it was really good. They can write legal documents. They can write code. They're really good at writing code, because code is a language. So this was a case, I knew what I wanted this software to do. I just didn't feel like doing it. So I gave it just the outline, and it wrote the code. It got it 98% correct. Now, the challenge with code is it has to be 100% correct to run, so you still do need some human overview and subject matter expertise to fix the small things it'll get wrong. But it saved me that first 98% of writing it. We can create tools with these things. I had this thing I wanted to do on my blog. I wanted to put a warning label on any post that was older than a year. So I went to the WordPress Codex and looked for a plugin that would do this, and there were plugins that were charging me $15 a month. I'm like, it's a one line of text, it's not that hard. So I said, let's talk to a language model and write this piece of software. Let's write a WordPress plugin. It wrote one for me. It took 3 or 4 cycles to iterate, and I got one that spit out, hey, there's a warning. I can now give this away. I am giving this away. It's free and open source. When we talk about things like SEO and marketing and attracting audience and retaining members, what are the functions and features and requests that you have been asked for in your association, a utility of some kind, some benefit for members? You might say, well, we don't have developers. You do now. You have developers you have an entire staff in these language models. So if there's a feature or an idea that you want to bring to life, use these language models to write most of the software, and then take the one developer that you have access to, maybe through an agency or whatever, buy him some beer and some pizza, say, proof my code and fix the things that aren't working. And now you have something you can give away. You can create intellectual property that you can give away or charge members for or whatever. But that's generation. Extraction is the second use case. Let's take information from one place and bring it to another. I had to do some SEO keyword lists. So I said, okay, let's take my entire organization's, all the content we have about organization, and said, write me a semantic keyword list, words and phrases that I can then put into an SEO tool to validate. It spit out a whole bunch. It also spit out some things that were not in my original documents, but are language related, because language model, like organizational theory consulting. I was like, we don't say we do that, but we do kind of do that. And now I know 2 things. 1, I can write some content for that. And 2, probably should talk about that more. Imagine taking your founding documents and saying, hey, what are the keywords that should be on this page? My favorite is summarization, extraction of data from call transcripts. I am on a lot of calls. You are on a lot of calls and meetings. Some days I can barely remember what I said. So I go to any of these tools, take the transcript from, there's a tool called Otter, and say, what are the meeting notes and action items? What did I say in that meeting that I completely forgot about? It spits out the list, and then I can go stick that in my to-do list and then do those things. That is incredibly valuable. If you have conversations you have with your board, with your members, with the general public that are in the spoken word, there are tools out there that will do transcription, and then you can extract that information and deal with it and pull insights from it. Today, if you use Google's Bard, there are what's called Bard workplace extensions that now can reach into things like your Gmail account and pull out information. I said, give me a count of how many emails I have from each sender in my inbox, and it spits this out and said, great, now I know who I ignored this week. Sorry. That's extraction. Summarization is the third use case. For a nonprofit, well, you can get the slides. You're good? Okay. I took this a nonprofit. We wanted to create an executive sort of vision, a mission statement. So we took 20 interviews from 20 leaders in the organization, put them in a big pile, and then tossed them into a language model and said, give me a mission statement. And it spit out a 1-paragraph mission statement that boiled down everything that people thought their organization was about. And when all 20 people looked at it, they're like, yeah, that's pretty clear. That's pretty much what we do, right? If you have trouble talking about yourself as an organization, you're not sure what to say about yourself, take information from your members, from your staff, from the general public even, and use these tools to summarize it down. You will be surprised at what gets surfaced. This is from my teacher's martial arts school. I've been doing martial arts at this school for about 30 years now. He was trying to figure out, what do I put on social media? How do I write about my school? And I said, well, let's take all the 5-star reviews that the school has gotten on Google Business, stick them in a language model, and say, let's write some Instagram content from that. We have been talking as marketers about the voice of the customer for, 40 years? We still have not actually used the voice of the customer at all. We just keep talking about it because there's so much of it. But now, with language models, we can take the voice of the customer and use it to create marketing. And here's the funny thing, it works better. It works better because our customers will say things about us that we don't think about, or that maybe we don't feel comfortable saying those words. But it resonates better with your customers because that's what they're using, their words. So using the voice of the customer. Doing things like reviews, taking customer service feedback data and boiling that down. This is a synthetic example. I made a fictional Norwegian restaurant and a 500 Yelp reviews and boiled it down into a list of recommendations. Think about every time you run an annual survey of your members, what feedback you get, that open-ended feedback. Can you be using it? Can you boil it down into the top 5 things that people like about your organization and the 5 things they wish you would do better? T-Mobile made a gazillion dollars in the 2010s just on one platform. They called it the Uncarrier. They made a list of all the things customers hated, and they stopped doing them. And it was revolutionary. You can do the same thing. Take all the information that you get of things people don't like about working with you and stop doing them. These are professional development tools, bar none. There's so much to learn in marketing. There's so much information out there. I wanted to know what was happening in October in the world of SEO. And there's a lot of people, like on YouTube, that are creating huge tutorials. I don't have time for that. So I took 5.5 hours of these YouTube videos, ran them through a tool to transcribe them, and said, just give me the top 30 bullet points of everything that happened in these 5.5 hours. Most of it was not revelatory, which means I didn't really miss anything. But I did find a few things here and there, in particular how to deal with Microsoft Bing, because its search engine runs differently now thanks to generative AI. Think about all the stuff that you want to learn in association marketing. Think about SEO, maybe email marketing. How much content is there out there, and how much time do you have to go through it all? Use summarization tools to boil it down to the key points. And if you see something really interesting, then you can say, hey, I'm going to go back and rewatch that video because there's something in there that no one else had. 4th use case, rewriting. These tools can take language, because it's language, and turn it into other language. I got this NDA from this guy, and I read this thing, and it was like, did you copy this off of Reddit? Like, were you drunk? What happened? It turns out both were true. And I said, I can't sign this. So I put it into a language model, and I said, rewrite this NDA to best practices. It did. I then handed it to my lawyer. My lawyer said, yes, now you can sign it and send it back to him. You can rewrite pretty much any document. So if you've ever done any kind of contract negotiation where you want to do red lines and stuff, have the tools help you do that. These are incredible tools for understanding concepts that you don't get. There's 2 arcane concepts in model construction called model parameters and model weights, and there's a bunch of math that goes with them. Most of the time when I read those papers, because I didn't do so well in calculus, they kind of just slide off my brain. So I said to the tool, explain this in terms of pizza. Model parameters are the number of different toppings you have on your pizza. Model weights are how much of each topping there is. And now I understand this concept. If you've ever sat in a meeting or at a conference and you've been like, I don't know what this person's saying and I should, pull out your phone, pull up the language model of your choice and ask it to put it in something you understand. If you understand music, explain this to me in the circle of fifths. If you like golf, explain this to me as if it were the back nine of a golf course. Whatever the thing is that you know best personally, a language model can rewrite difficult concepts into something you understand. Your professional development, your skill will dramatically increase immediately because now you can understand things the way your brain works. Again, rewriting. Bob, you sent over 2 months of invoices in one day. Of course it's not done. It's not going to be done anytime soon because this stuff takes time. And if you needed it sooner, you shouldn't have let it sit on your effing desk for 2 weeks. You can F right off, and you'll get it when you get it. Go have yourself Karen in accounting. Rewrite the following memo in a professional tone of voice. Dear Bob, I hope this message finds you well. If you've ever wanted to say something but know it's going to get you fired, say it to a language model and have it put it in a more professional sense. Right? That's what these tools are incredibly good at. Classifying text is a fifth use case. If you've ever inherited a lot of text, maybe 40 years of your association's journals or a blog, you can feed these things, these language models, these things, and hey, just classify them. What are the 3 topics this thing is about? What was the most mentioned topic this month? These models are excellent at classifying content and turning them into digestible data that you can then use, maybe with your Google Analytics, and say, hey, what are the most popular topics on our blog? Maybe what are the most popular topics in our competitor's blog? Whatever the case is, you can classify tremendous amounts of content. And you can use it with any kind of language. This is a personality analysis. I said, hey, I've got this new point of contact at a client. I just had a 30-minute call with them. I took just her parts of the conversation and put it into a language model and said, give me a big 5 personality analysis from psychology. And it spit out, here's an assessment of who this person is. I've gotten to know this person since then, and this is a pretty decent assessment. Now, when you think about it, if you're working with, say, a important donor and you've got a whole bunch of new folks in your team, could you match up personalities so that there's less likely to be a conflict? When you're working with members, are there certain people that should and should not talk to certain kinds of members based on their personality? These tools can do personality analysis. And 6th, question answering. Answering questions. Now, the tools are good at answering questions generally. I would say for question answering about factual things, use Microsoft Bing or use Google Bard because they both have buttons that say, check my work and make sure that I'm not making things up. This is one I was asking about importing body armor into the EU because I was bored one day. But they're really good at answering questions about your data. Here's an example. I took an NDA and I said, review this NDA. I care about it being fair. Is this NDA fair? And it spit out an analysis of here's the things that are in this NDA that are fair and not fair. This is using Anthropic's Claude. If you've ever had to score the joy of RFPs, right? Hey, we got 48 RFP responses. You take each response, you say in your prompt, these are the 5 things I really care about. Give me a score of 0 to 100, how well this RFP satisfies those 5 things. You'll be through that pile of 48 RFPs in less than 3 weeks, right? You'll be probably done inside of an hour, and then you can get back to doing your work, or you can take the top 3 and then read them more carefully. Language models can digest down enormous amounts of text and turn them into actionable things that you don't have to spend all your time reading on, because let's be honest, most of what's in an RFP is BS anyway. It's like, we're the flexible, scalable, best in class, whatever. Just tell me the 5 things I care about. Any document that you have, you can ask questions of. And as we've heard already, these things can see. They can, not well, but they can see and understand visually images. I took a picture of my home page and said, I need to improve the user experience. I know it sucks. What are the specific things that I could do to make my website more user-friendly? This is GPT-4's vision model. It spit out, hey, here's the 10 things that you do wrong on your website. After being a little disappointed in myself, I looked at the list and said, okay, I now have a punch list of stuff that I can do. If you've ever gotten comments from your users, from your members, hey, I was in the membership portal, I can't find anything. Take a snapshot of it, feed it into a model and say, help me understand from a UI UX perspective what things I could do to make this easier for people to use. So those are the 6 big categories. Again, there's an infinite number of use cases because language is infinite. So when should you use AI? We used to have this really complex flowchart. Now the answer is just use it. A study came out about a month ago now from Boston Consulting Group in Harvard Business School. They took 700 of their consultants and split them into a control group and then into a test group and gave the test group access to AI and minimal instruction. Of the people who were using AI, they finished 12% more tasks, completed those tasks 25% faster, and produced 40% higher quality results across the board. Now, this is across a lot of different domains, and these are not stupid people, right? This is not menial stuff. These are really intense cognitive tasks, and yet they were able to get some incredible results. When you dig down into the academic paper itself, what was shocking was the bottom half of low performers in the test group after using AI had the same scores as the top performers in the control group. AI turned the bottom performers into top performers in a very, very short amount of time. So think about your own organization, the people who work for you. Who are the people who need more coaching? These tools are the world's best coaches to bring them up to speed and get them to have capabilities that your top performers already have. They are creative. So this is a study in Nature magazine, a peer-reviewed science journal, that was people were given divergent thinking, like brainstorming tasks. And on average, machines scored better at creative tasks than the average humans did by 81%. Machines on average are more creative. Now, the top performing creative humans still outperform the top performing creative machines, but as the study said, in not so blunt terms, some people just have really bad ideas. But these machines are creative. So how do you get started? Start by looking at your own processes. Put up a standard consultant's 2x2 matrix and say, what are the things that we want to fix inside our company? What are the things that are going to be member-facing, external? So that's one set of columns. And then the second set of columns, the rows are, what are things that are going to be incremental improvements? Like we want to write content faster, we want to read RFPs faster. And what are things that are going to be net new? Like maybe we are going to use Azure to make a customer-facing chatbot. But take all of the tasks, all the processes that you do on a regular and frequent basis, stick them on here. Just do a task collection exercise one afternoon, and then start from there, say, okay, well, what are the ones that are urgent and important, and we can use AI to start taking on those tasks. That's how you get started with your team. Now, it's not all sunshine and roses. There are problems with these tools because, again, they scraped all of the internet. The internet's a reflection of humanity. There are large chunks of humanity that suck. OpenAI has this as a warning label. For example, we found that our models more strongly associate European American names with positive sentiment when compared with African American names, and negative stereotypes with black women. If you are making something that is customer facing, like a chatbot, if I am talking to a chatbot and I use my American name and I use my Korean name, they should get the same treatment. Do they? No. They do not, out of the box. You have to use a lot of extra tooling to reduce the likelihood of that happening. So that is a problem. And we are getting closer to fixing this, but it is still not a solved problem, in part because things like fairness we don't have answers for as human beings. We were talking earlier about ethics. How do you deal with ethics in these machines? We don't understand ethics as humans, so it's unfair to expect machines to be able to provide an ethics guidelines for things that we don't understand. On the topic of copyright, there's two fronts of copyright. One is, hey, these things were built using, among other things, lots of copyrighted data. Now, in some parts of the world, that's an unresolved question. In the US, there's 4 major lawsuits about this topic, one of which was just defeated. So the US is nudging towards machines that these models do not violate copyright. The EU has said, yes, that violates copyright. Building models from copyright data is a violation. Japan went the other way and said it does not. So we're kind of in a race globally for which countries are going to be the most favorable for software development. And countries like Japan are trying to get ahead of that because they want to encourage investment in them. On the flip side, in the USA, machine-made content cannot be copyrighted. Machine-generated content cannot be copyrighted. So the moment you put up a blog post that was entirely written by, say, ChatGPT, you can't copyright that. And if someone were to come along and copy and paste that entire blog post to put it on their blog, you have no legal recourse because it's automatically in the public domain. This was from a law case called Naruto versus Slater, where a chimpanzee took a selfie and the court ruled the chimp did the work, but copyright only applies to humans, therefore there is no copyright on that photo. We are seeing the first seeds of regulation. You heard about the Bletchley meeting and you saw President Biden's executive order. These things are largely toothless because the technology itself is out there. It's been open sourced. So regulating it would be like trying to regulate spreadsheets. You can regulate some of the big players, but the technology is out there. What we can say for sure is the call for regulation, at least in the USA, is going to get much, much louder second half of next year and early to 2025. Why? Because this technology is going to be horrendously misused during the 2024 election cycle. And that is what will spur a call for regulation. We did see examples earlier of where these tools work, right? Synthetics. We here, you are in the know. You are in the lead. You are the top 5% within your organization, within your industry about these technologies. Most people can't tell the difference between what's machine generated and what's not. When you've seen all these synthetic videos, like the synthetic videos, even just to start the day today, no one can tell the difference. Your friends, your families may not be able to tell the difference. And so this is a substantial problem that our society needs to solve. So how do we start deploying these things? It's a 4-step process. Your prompt engineering, deployment, tuning models, and then app construction. Again, prompt engineering, very simple. Getting people to just use the tool. Use AI. Use AI for everything until you figure out yourself what AI can't do. Here's a basic hint. If it's language, it does it really well. If it's not language, it's terrible at it. These tools are really bad at, for example, at math. They just can't count. Ask them to do word count, they can't count. You want to use systems that are appropriate. So there are these open source models that run on your laptop. You download it, you run it on your laptop, and then your sensitive data is never leaving your computer. You also saw in Courtney's presentation, Azure and the OpenAI, Microsoft has its version of OpenAI that is contained so that your stuff only happens within that instance. It's not shared. Simple rule of thumb for AI systems as to whether it's sharing or using your data. If you're not paying for it, it's using your data. This stuff is in everything. It's going to be in more and more places. Here's Microsoft Visual Studio Code. You right-click on it and say, fix my code, and it does. Microsoft Copilot in Microsoft Office now has the ability to look at your document store within Office 365 and do stuff like make me a presentation from this press release or tell me what's in this spreadsheet so that I don't have to read it. The most important thing you can do today is build a prompt library. This is just a collection of the prompts that you've used that you can share within your organization, that you can give around within your team and have other people in your team contribute and improve these prompts. I use an app called Joplin. You can use Evernote. You can use Microsoft OneNote. If you're stuck in the 7th circle of hell, you can use Microsoft SharePoint. Sorry, Courtney. But whatever the system is, keep track of the prompts, and ideally keep track of the prompts and their outputs, because you want to have this information be shareable. One other word of caution. You are a programmer. Your prompts are code, which means, would you be okay with your organization having a developer say, just paste their code on LinkedIn and say, hey, look what I wrote, right? Probably not. You're like, you should not be sharing our source code just with the general public. Your prompts are code. So your organization probably should have some rules about whether you should be sharing your code with the general public as well. There's a lot of people on LinkedIn saying, hey, here's my top 50 ChatGPT prompts. Like, thanks for the code. Second, if you find prompts that are high value, that you want to use over and over again, you're going to want to start thinking about building systems around them. You want to use a system, there's so many, but you want to test these things out and then work with the tools or work with human developers or both to build infrastructure that can use these prompts at scale. If there's a process you do every month or every quarter for quarterly board meetings, build those prompts into software that can then run automatically over and over again. If you're putting together the same slide deck every quarter for your reporting, use these tools to automate that. The third bucket is fine-tuning models. This is where you're now going to take a model and like a dog that you've trained to sniff for bombs or sniff for drugs, sniff for earthquake survivors. When you fine-tune a model, you are essentially saying, I'm going to make this model bad at everything except this one thing. You'll take any of these models and say, I want it now to just do one thing only. And like that dog, if it can sniff for earthquake survivors, it can't sniff for drugs or bombs anymore. It can only do that one thing. But it does that one thing really, really well. As an example, I took our CEO's blog post that she's written over the last 5 years, and I said, let's train a model to write just like her. We took all that data, used tools to convert it into the numbers that machines understand, and built a toy model. It can't do most language model tasks, right? Like it can't turn Guns N' Roses lyrics into limericks, but it can write like her. And it can write like her so well that it's uncanny. That's the only thing it can do, but it does it really well. You will want to use this for specific tasks in your organization that are super high value or that are very specific. I was doing a talk at a major healthcare system on the East Coast a couple months ago, and it was to their gynecology department, which is super awkward. And they said, we want to use patient data. Okay, great. Let's take that data and use it with a private model that only runs within your servers, because you absolutely do not want to give protected healthcare information to anyone else, and help them build this model that it can do exactly what they want. With fine-tuning, the more tuned the model is, the shorter the prompt has to be, because it can only do one thing now. Right? It can only do that one specific task. And we are now seeing ecosystems of apps show up. So this is where you take systems like LangChain, or you saw Microsoft AutoGen earlier, and building not just inputs and outputs to language models, but entire apps that use a language model as part of them. I was in my hotel room the other day, and I said, I need to summarize our blog posts. So with this ecosystem powered by AI, it said, okay, I'll build you a web browser, and it did. I'll tell that web browser to scrape the web, it did. It said, I'll build you a database, it did. It said, I'm going to pass this through a language model to write the summaries, which it did. And it said, I'm going to put the summaries in a spreadsheet for you. So instead of just me asking a language model and copying and pasting, it built me an app from beginning to end that allowed me to do this. You are a developer. Everyone in this room is a developer. So how is this going to impact marketing? A few different ways. A recent study in Search Engine Journal showed that, this was a B2B SaaS study, generative search experiments, Google's summarization of results, caused their customers to lose at a minimum of 18% of their search traffic, and up to 64% of their search traffic just went evaporated, because people were so satisfied with AI summary, they didn't need to browse more. So one of your homework assignments is to go onto these models and ask each model, hey, what do you know about our association? Ask it and then see what it spits out. And you're going to notice, like Bard, not a whole lot to click on. LinkedIn, Bing will give you 4 links to click on. ChatGPT will give you nothing. And so the open source models will also give you nothing to click on. But you want to do this exercise. If you rely on unbranded search, informational search, like what are some resources to learn about B2B marketing, this is where organizations are going to get hurt, because these models are so good at answering questions that people don't need to search more. They don't need to click through. If you go on to all these different queries, these things are just going to eat away that search. Second piece of homework for you. You're going to go to Google Search Console or Bing Webmaster Tools and just count up what percentage of your search traffic is unbranded, meaning it's not using your company's name, and what percentage is branded. If more than 50% of your search traffic to your website is unbranded, you are at substantial risk. You are at substantial risk from AI taking away a lot of your traffic and a lot of your ability to attract attention. How do you deal with this? How do we fix this? Well, there's 3 things to do. 1, be everywhere. Be in as many places as possible on the internet, right? If there's a podcast that wants to interview you, great, say yes. Even if it has 2 listeners, who cares? Be everywhere, because you want as much information out there about you as possible online. You're going to upend your PR strategy. Our PR strategy is typically, hey, let's get in top-tier publications like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNN. A language model doesn't care. A page from the New York Times is equally as valuable as a page from the East Peoria Evening News. It's the same pile of text. So if you can be in more places, even if they're not top-tier publications, you're going to do better with these models as they start to condense down the internet into summaries. Second, you must have channels that are direct to audience with no AI in the way. Email newsletters, for example, is a critical channel if you don't control a way to talk to people directly. Text messaging directly to people. Even direct mail, postal mail to people's houses is great, because there's no AI in the way from you communicating directly with your audience. And third, you want to have some kind of digital community, again, with no AI on the way. So no Facebook groups, no LinkedIn groups. Something like Slack or Discord would be my choice these days, that allows you to directly talk with people and retain them. The Digitalnow in the app, the Sidecar app, is an example of one of these communities where you would want to, there's no AI in the way, it's just you and the people around you. So let's talk about your career. This is the question everyone wants the answer to. And the answer is not really easy. The Brookings Institute has a tendency to say that AI will take away tasks, not jobs. That's kind of true. The reality is, a person who is skilled at AI will take the jobs, plural, of people who are not. A person who is skilled at AI will take the jobs, plural, of people who are not. Go back to 1762. There used to be this profession called spinster. They would take fibers and weave them into thread. In 1762, the spinning jenny was invented, which essentially did this at much greater scale. And a whole bunch of people who were spinsters no longer had that profession, because now a machine operated by one of them could do the work of 10 or 15 or 20 of these people. This is already happening. In May, the Writers Guild went on strike. 14 minutes after they went on strike, folks are starting to get inquiries. I just got my first inquiry from a studio needing a writer to use some AI to write some dialogue. Right? Companies are recognizing this. I talked to a colleague earlier this week who said they fired 80% of their marketing team because the executives thought, AI will do it. They're in for a bit of a rude awakening that that's not exactly true, but these are the decisions that are being made right now. So, a person who is skilled with AI will take the jobs of people who are not. Again, if you are in this room or you're hearing this and watching this, this should be you. You are going to be the person who is skilled with AI, and you're going to go back to your organization, and you're going to take your people and get them skilled with AI so that A, they can be a force multiplier in your organization, but B, they can remain gainfully employed. So in the last few minutes, what's around the corner? We've heard multimodal. The tools are like that. ChatGPT, for example, now has DALL-E image creation in it. But these are getting multimodal in many, many different ways. This is from Boston Dynamics. This is Spot, which I'm sure you've seen. So it's one of their robots. They just integrated a language model.
Greetings, good sirs. May I have the pleasure of knowing your names?
I'm Matt, and that's Vache.
A pleasure to meet you, Matt and Vacha. Shall we commence our journey? The charging stations where Spot robots rest and recharge is our first point of interest. Follow me, gentlemen.
So the tools can now see, hear, have conversations with you, and follow you around and give you tours, right? That's how fast the space is evolving. This is about a week old. We are now seeing machines that can interact in the physical world, and that's going to change how models work. If you want some other examples, there's a great commercial Coca-Cola did called Masterpiece, using taking classical artworks and animating them. Second big thing is agent networks. Other people have called this autonomy. This is available today. There's a piece of software, for example, called GPT Author that, in relatively short order, can write a 15-chapter trashy romance novel. It's not very good. I mean, as trashy romance novels goes, it's not very good. But 6 months ago, this was not possible at all. Now, with agent networks, these tools can do this and do it very, very cheaply. This is a focus group here. You can see the conversation talking about Google Analytics. There's Chris, which is me, Erica Expert, Nellie Novice, and Indigo Intermediate, and we're talking about how to improve Google Analytics. None of these people are real, except me. I'm real. Everyone else here is synthetic. So I took a piece of role-playing software powered by AI and gave it 3 personalities of 3 different customer types and had a conversation. And if I took away the silly names, you would not know that these were not human. Think about the things in your organization. Are there archetypes? Are there people that you have high-value conversations with that maybe you'd like to test an idea out with? You could create a synthetic focus group as an agent network and float ideas past them and see what they have to say. Anticipate potential problematic reactions you might get. Fable Studios created an episode of South Park, 22 minutes, video, audio, script, using agent networks, and it did it in 3 hours. Now, if you've ever worked in a writer's room, you know it takes 3 hours just to figure out what a plot is, much less generate an episode. The downside was it wasn't very funny because they used ChatGPT, which is heavily censored. So none of the jokes we associate with South Park made it in. Had they used an uncensored model, it would have been better, but it did it in 3 hours. The open source movement is incredibly powerful. This is where a lot of the innovation is happening. People are taking models like Meta's Llama model and customizing them. There is probably a model out there on a place, this is one repository called Hugging Face, that you can find and download for your purposes. There's one, for example, called Karen the Editor. All it does is edit. But these tools are open source and they can create all sorts of things. They are now getting into true creativity. There's a project called Dream GPT. What it does is it takes the mistakes these models make and turns them into brainstorming sessions, to create new products. And so these tools are evolving to actually be creative. And as mentioned, they're accessible. They're everywhere. They're in Photoshop now, in Illustrator now. Adobe just showed a version that's going to be in Adobe Premiere, where it can change an outfit you're wearing as you're walking down the street in a video. But what's really powerful is that a lot of this tooling is available to you on the machines you have today. If you can play Call of Duty on your laptop and not have it melt immediately, you can run these open source tools. For nonprofits, for associations, that means you can run them effectively for free. Right? The example I gave of YouTube transcription, that's using OpenAI's Whisper model running on my laptop. I don't pay a dime for it, which is why I can transcribe hundreds of hours of video, because it runs on my machine. And lastly, these tools are getting integrated with everything. This is a fascinating use case. Meta hooked a non-invasive brain scanner to people, showed them a picture for 1 second, and then a generative model read their brain waves and tried to reconstruct what they saw. It was about 60% accurate. Right? What this means is that in the near future, you're not going to have to sit there and figure out how to prompt a tool, because they will literally just scan your brain. So some final thoughts. If you want to know what model to use, remember, you can get the slides at wherecanIgettheslides.com. If you want to know what model to use for which task, I have a whole bunch broken out here. Text under 8,000 words, ChatGPT+. Text over 8,000 words, Anthropic's Claude. Creating images, Microsoft Bing Image Creator or ChatGPT+ with DALL-E. For analyzing images, Bard or ChatGPT+ with the Vision model. For real-time information, Bing or Bard. For analyzing data, ChatGPT's Advanced Data Analysis. There's no tool like it right now. For sensitive information, open source models or enterprise subscriptions like Azure. And for writing code, ChatGPT+ or Code Llama. This is a starter kit. There are lots of companies that are offering lots of software. The danger of that, as we heard from the first speaker today, is that the space is doubling in capacity every 6 months, and a vendor that builds a tool around a specific model doesn't keep up. And so in 6 months, that vendor's once best-in-class tool is now out of date. So if you stick close to the foundational tools, you'll keep up as the space evolves. Last thought on this topic. What differentiates you now is no longer skill. I can't sing. Oh, I mean, I can, you just don't want to hear it. I can't play music, I can barely draw. But I have ideas about songs I would like to hear, or images I would like to make. AI now gives me those capabilities to do at least above average work. Maybe not good, great, certainly not Pulitzer Prize winning, but it gives me those capabilities. So your strategic differentiator is two things: the data you have and the quality and quantity of your ideas. Because the tools will do the work. You have to bring the ideas. And the more creative and intelligent and innovative your ideas are, the better the tools work. So that is how you differentiate yourself, how you stay gainfully employed in an age of AI. If you would like, there's a free book. Go to trustinsights.ai/new AI book. This is free because it goes out of date rapidly. And with that, I believe we're going to break for lunch. And then this afternoon, all of the keynote speakers are going to be on a panel up here. And then we each have breakout sessions where you can come and ask questions of anything you saw in our talks. So thank you very much.